Welcome to another edition of the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Deliver, your host, and my guest today is Mike Madero, Vice President at Mr. Cooper. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you. Glad to be here. How's it going?
Good. It's good. So, Mike, you're in the, the umbrella that you're in is in the security space. And I say that jokingly because there's so much to security, right? I mean, there's email security, web security, DLP as well. But you focus on the identity and access management. Do I have this correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So my first question is, and I like to get definitions out there when I get someone like you on the show, because the people in technology might understand it, but we get a lot of people that are not in technology. What is identity and access management? Get a definition out there to level set, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So I guess at a basic level, identity and access management is managing the people, what they have access to, and what level of access they should have to anything they need to do their jobs, right? And terms you'll hear associated with that is least privilege, right? Another term you may hear of things that people want to achieve is maybe zero trust. That's another big buzzword. And, if you can't get to least privilege, you're going to have a hard time getting to zero trust, right?
Yeah.
Because some of that is, it's basically the opposite of letting everybody have as much privilege as they want in the environment so they can do everything. Because, of course, everything works better when everyone can do everything. Yeah. Right? Unfortunately, what happens in those scenarios is any person now that gets compromised now has the ability to do anything as a compromised person. So you want to bring that everyone's base permission down to almost nothing. They barely have enough access to do their jobs, and that's what identity and access management helps you do. It's actually a big piece of almost every security program, whether or not they realize it.
Yeah.
Because, you may have a bunch of tools and they will function well as long as you can tell it, well, here are the people that are high priority, here are the lower priority people, and here's what people should be able to do, here's what you should be able to stop, what may not be a great idea. And if you don't have the information to give to those tools so they can make those decisions or help you make those decisions, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah, and I always the term I've heard, people think that they can put a security platform in place, whatever it is, right? And they think it's a set it and forget it. But what I think most people are in for a little bit of a shock is when this takes care and feeding. This isn't just you install the software and it's done. So talk a little bit about that, because this is constant monitoring, right? This is
yes.
Talk about why
that leads me to another buzzword: continuous monitoring, continuous measurement, and things like that. Defining metrics, whatever. Basically what you're talking about is maturity model, right? So as you start the journey, you have some basic blocking and tackling you're trying to get done, right? Maybe you're trying to get to a place where you can spin up basic network access and then turn it off when people leave the company, right? So maybe you have a feed coming in from HR, says, hey, we have a new person. Okay, great. They need this, that, and the other. And you want to set those up in an automagic fashion so they can get up and go and be productive as soon as possible. But then when they leave, they say, "Oh, this person left the company. All right, well, we're going to turn off this, that, and the other." So that doesn't linger.
I mean, is a lot of this stuff automated, Mike?
It can be.
I could got to believe
by default.
If you have a company with 50 people, a little bit different than having a company with like 100,000 people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you manage it? How do you manage something that large? Because Mr. Cooper, you're Mr. Cooper. That's a pretty large company. How many employees do you have?
Altogether in the 12,000 range. Contractors and employees, whatnot. But whether it's 10 people or 1,000 or 100,000, once you automate the process, it's really just a matter of, making sure everything kicked off the way it was possible. And validating that the health of the environment is good. the thing that happens is audit really doesn't care. The people that are measuring how well you're achieving your objectives, they don't really care if you got, 100 people to deal with or 100,000 to deal with. They go, how many misses did you have and why? Right? So, well, you missed, and if they decide it's because your design or your approach is flawed, you are the proud owner of a significant deficiency. And that is the one thing that, CIOs, CISOs, they never want to see, right? Those are, that usually means that it's, especially if you do have the opportunity to have that happen twice, one, you were fortunate, but then you also probably wasted an opportunity, because those tend to be, what do they call those? Resume generating events. That's what they call
I was going to
those.
say, you might be looking for a job. Yeah, so I mean, are you responsible for more than just identity management, or are you doing other things in your role? I mean,
Yes, I mean, so you almost never have a role. Different stops. I've had everything from privileged access management, sometimes secure SDLC, and other things that other duties as assigned, as they like to say.
yep.
So it's but most of them tend to be in some way, shape, or form tied back to identity. What everybody can do.
So I know that we have a lot of customers that security is a big issue, and what we see, one of the biggest issues is phishing and things like that. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, that to me is one of the biggest threat vectors out there is phishing, and how does that play into what you do?
So, that kind of goes back to the zero trust, least privilege, right? So, phishing is one of the primary, what they will call a threat vector. It's a way people get in, right? Since the 1980s, my joke is that hacking hasn't really changed a whole lot, right? There's always been the straightforward, let me see if I can, get past this firewall or security,
Yep.
protection or what have you, or I can go ask nicely. Now, in the recent news that Kevin Mitnick recently passed, that was one of his biggest things was, convincing the users to help him get in. Social engineering, you may have heard,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Phishing is just another form of that, right? Instead of trying to get past your firewall, get past your edge security or whatever, let me just send, let me look here on LinkedIn, people that are working for company A. This guy says he is a CEO. This other person says he's the chief technology officer. Let me see if I can email one of them. I might be able to guess their, emails tend to be one of several patterns. Let me try a few of them, see if my
Sure.
email gets
Yep.
through with an enticing little link that will direct them to a site that I have where I can either capture their current username and password or, steal a session token or anything else that might give me a foothold in your environment, right? So that happens. Now they're hoping they can impersonate you. Well, if your
Right.
privileges, going back to the beginning of our conversation, are just barely enough to do your job and, not a lot else, then, okay, they may have gotten themselves a foothold. You really want to limit what they can do, first,
Right.
because you don't want them to try to move around your network or
East
your
or west,
environment.
right? Yeah.
Right. And try to, find a way to move north and escalate. Right. Yeah. Just real quick. You want to limit their ability to do that so that you can find the initial event where they got a foothold, and you can,
Right.
if you have the time and space to identify that this event happened, you can go squish it. And then, while they may have briefly had a foothold while they were trying to figure out where they could go, you can go mitigate that.
Yeah. I would think with all the tools that are out there today, I mean, nothing's foolproof. We both know that, Mike. But I would think with all the monitoring tools that are out there and all the remediation tools, it is getting a little easier. I don't mean easier in
It
the sense
is.
that hackers are out there, but it's it's less cumbersome, right? It's more automated than it used to be. Is that
Yeah.
am I understanding this correctly?
It is. It's there's a lot of stuff you have to do, right? And a lot of the things are people centric, right? One of the biggest complaints about security is now you're going to stop me from doing this, or now I got to do all this other stuff, right? We like to call that friction. Right? Now there's a lot more friction in getting your job done, and historically, people have been not so open to that, right? But the now these days there's a lot less friction. There are ways where security is almost always interested in turning things off and limiting this, limiting that, and what have you. But we also have a lot of good automation tools. So typically, what the value proposition winds up being is, look, here's what we want. We want to go put these controls in. Yes, it's a little bit of a bump in your day-to-day. We try to limit that as much as possible. And here's some benefits you can have as well, right? I will use the tollway example because almost all these metropolitan areas have tollways. If you think about the old tollways where you actually had to stop at a booth, maybe give somebody some money, get change. It's kind of a pain. You're trying to cruise along as fast as possible. Now you got to stop, wait in line, whatever. Now we have toll tags, right? And at first, the ask was, well, you buy this toll tag for X amount of dollars. You give us a credit card, we'll bill you automatically. You put it up in your car, and you get to cruise through these other lanes instead of waiting in line for all the people that need change, right? We get more assurance that we'll get paid, and we have cameras, oh, by the way, to see who's going down our roads and how many and all that fun stuff. But you get a faster way to cruise through traffic. That's a classic example of the frictionless security and the value proposition, the trade-off. So now, unfortunately, what that means for us is you can very quickly wind up with a $200 toll tag bill at the end of the month if you're not paying attention how many times you're going down the road, right? But hey, you got
even
there
more
very
than that, Mike.
Yeah,
I was going to say. So, Mike, you're a company. What can you do in your role to educate people at your company, ongoing training? Because that's a big part of it too. Like, what do you do in that regard? Because I know our company has some training sessions. It's not full. Again, when you rely on a human, we're going to make mistakes.
No, absolutely. But there's different things you can go to educate yourself. What we try to do is try to tie everything back into what you do at home, right? Because if you're thinking about these things when you're at home, you're a lot more likely to take that same care when you go to work, right? Give you some examples. I try to tie things back to the household, right? If you want to make sure that people don't come into your house like when you're asleep, well, there's a lock on your door, and you can put a deadbolt, or you can put an additional camera on your doorbell. All these things are tiny lifts, right? And there are some extra things that you have to do to get in. You have to disable an alarm. You have to turn, get rid of a deadbolt, whatever. But there's more security. Some of them actually give you some other benefits. They're like, hey, now I can answer my doorbell from remote, tell someone to get off my lawn and not have to leave my comfy couch or whatever, right? So there's always the trade-offs, the benefits to go along with those things, and what we try to do is like, look, you would never really think about leaving your house completely unlocked and open, right? Why would you do that with your workstation, right? It's like, hey, well, I'm just going to go to the store. Why do I got to lock my front door? Like, well, you may just going to be going out to lunch, but why do you got to lock your workstation? It's like, well, because there's stuff there that you're, that's important, that you want to protect, and that's important to the company as well. So that's kind of the analogy.
Now, do you guys do actual
They like to do.
training modules to, or not just you? I hate to make it about you guys, but in general,
We
companies
do.
should.
No, 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 no. I mean, you talk to any security professional these days, and you'll hear a common theme. I think a lot of the legacy approaches where, hey, here's this hour-long security awareness thing that you've seen over and over and over. They don't really move the needle. People still have issues. A lot of that's kind of losing favor, I will say. And people are going more
Yep.
with a bite-size approach, right? Let me give you a quick 2 to 3 minutes of your time, maybe a quick 2, 3 question, and not a shame fest where, hey, you failed. Guess what? You get more training. Congrats. That'll win you
Yeah.
some hearts and minds.
No, I've heard that same thing, Mike. That doing the bite-sized little, because if you get a link to say, hey, you've got to do this training, and you know it's 5 minutes, you'll do it. But if it's an hour, you're gonna tend to like, oh, let me put that off to tomorrow
Yeah.
or the next day.
Yeah, you'll find other things that you got to do that prevent you from devoting a whole hour of your time. Because ask me how I know.
Yeah, and that makes sense because it's repetitive at that point. If you're getting like a couple of minutes a week, it's front and center versus getting one a quarter.
Right.
Right. That it's an hour long. Once that hour's over, you forget about it. So I think that
Yeah,
strategy
absolutely.
is a good one.
One of the other things we like to do is it's happened a few times post pandemic. It was a lot more common pre pandemic, but we will try to host events. Invite people. Nowadays it's like more likely to be a virtual event, but we will have little workshops, right? How to set up your home router in a secure manner. Because people hear about it, like, well, I don't want people stealing my Wi-Fi. How do I keep people from doing that? We'll show you some common things to do. Show you common features to look for in a router if you're going to go purchase one. A lot of them have anti-malware built in, and features like that. For those that really want to get fancy, there's a way that you can set up your own VPN, virtual private network presence, if you don't want to use somebody else's. You'll see now a lot of vendors saying, well, don't do banking transactions on your phone or online. You need to use a VPN, so you can trust that. It's like, well, okay, but who are you? All a virtual private network means is I'm going to go through your network instead of before I hit the internet, and you're going to do something to kind of tunnel or mask my origin. But all my data is going through you, and who are you? Why should I trust you versus?
How safe? Yeah, How safe is that,
and,
right?
So one of the things we tell people is you learn and you do this, but don't be afraid to question. If something doesn't sound right, don't be afraid to ask that next question. Well, why? Why is this better? In what way? And who's the consider the source. Who's telling you this? If somebody is telling you, hey, well, chocolate's really good for your health, and you should eat at least 5 pounds a day, and you figure out that person is in charge of sales at Hershey's, well, you got to consider that source, maybe not the best. Yeah.
The source. That's a great That's a great analogy, by the way, Mike.
Yep. It's one of my gifts.
So, Mike, your company and you've got a limited platform, some small tools, and you've got to increase your security posture, right? How does someone do that? What were the first things that you recommend that a company does to just assessments, all that other stuff?
Right. So, the first thing you want to do is go figure out what is important to the business. What do you need to protect? Where does it live? So you can prioritize, what do I need to do to actually accomplish that? Keeping in mind that one of the first things you'll want to be able to achieve is visibility into everything that is going to or from that thing, right? Who's talking to it? What is it talking to? Because you'll want to establish what normal looks like. Because obviously anything that does not fit into normal is abnormal, and you're going to want to go investigate that. And then once the what's and where's, where they're coming from, you can start figuring out, okay, well, what can I do to shore this up? What can I do to shore that up? And then that'll really inform, where you need to start making your investments, and you build up your program. And, what tends to happen is the different audit and compliance and regulators
Yep.
will tell you what you need to do in addition to,
Well, I know that's a
securing the main things.
yeah. Well, that's a big one now too. We hear that from our customers that insurance companies are putting some demands on you in order to
Yes.
get insured. You have to, you have to have multi-factor authentication. There's certain things that they're demanding you do in
Yes.
order to get insurance.
Yeah, well, I mean, insurance has never been about paying out. They're about collecting premiums, right? And so, as
Yep.
people have been getting insurance and having to, collect on those policies, the insurance companies they're getting smart. They sit in on those calls after the fact, the root cause calls, and with the Mandiants and everybody trying to figure out, well, how did this happen? What could we have done to prevent it? And so when Mandiant or one of those groups says like, well, if you have multi-factor authentication, that will limit what can happen. So insurance is right now multi-factor authentication. All these things are coming out of those meetings. They are now turning into requirements because they don't want to pay out.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't blame them. Nobody wants to throw money
Yeah,
out the door.
no. We've had customers come to us and say, "Hey, we just got notified if we don't have MFA by a certain date, they're not going to get insurance." So we're scrambling to get them set up with MFA, But you're right; these guys aren't security experts. They're just kind of regurgitating what they hear, right?
Yeah, at some point, someone said that boys under the age of 25, they don't need to drive really fast cars because they're kind of a liability. We really want them in tanks, right?
Yeah,
Something
there
that's
you
not
go.
going to get banged up a lot because they're gonna run into things.
Yeah,
So it's the same thing, right? They're looking at what drives risk, and to a large extent, so is information security. We're looking at what drives risk, so we can minimize those things. If it's a risky thing, then there's a good chance that sooner or later someone's going to take advantage of that and reap some benefits. Anytime there's a high risk in something, there's usually a high reward at the end of it. So
yeah. It's funny, Mike. You got me thinking about this. Is 10 years ago, maybe even less. Security was never a problem until it was a problem, right?
yes.
And people would react. That's what I. But now I see people being way more proactive with all the stuff that's in the news, all the breaches and hacks that all the some department stores in the U.S. government, and all these other banks. I think people are. It's front and center for most companies right now, from what I can see. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, more or less the same. I think, like everything else, a lot of it was there, but a lot of has gained a lot more visibility. People are, monetizing it a lot more. It used to be more of a badge of honor. Hey, look, I got control of this web page, and now instead of what it had, I put up this goofy picture, and hey, look what I did, and they showed it to all their friends. It was more of a, kind of fun, whatever. Well, now it's like, okay, well, yeah, other organizations have gotten into it, and they're just making money. It's no longer the fun, happy group of hackers like you saw in the '90s movies, where they're just a bunch of kids trying to get some laughs, right?
These are
pros.
Yeah, just raising hell, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, these guys are pros.
But
they're after one thing only, and they're coming from all the places you would think. The North Koreas, the Chinas, Middle East. You name it, any place that is that's really hard up for cash. That's where it's going.
Yep. Yeah, and these guys are getting smarter every day. I mean, the tricks that they keep coming up with, you just got to stay ahead of the curve as best you can, I'm assuming.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Whereas before you had a bunch of, kids that they would take advantage of these things, but then they would, after they got credit for it, and they would tell you, yeah, here's how I did it. Here's how you fix it. The criminals, they're not telling you how they got in there, because they have no reason to brag about how they did it and what you need to do to stop them or anything like that. They're going to keep doing it until you catch them. So that's the other big difference. and why some of these things get so widespread. But a lot of it is still comes back to the getting people to help you. And the other thing that I forgot about was the lazy admins. There are a lot of things that IT people do just to make things faster, easier for them to do. Well, all those guys, the adversary, they're IT folks too, and they had an admin job, and they know what all these tricks of the trade are, and they're taking advantage of them. Right? They know that most organizations that are larger than your office of 12, they can't just haul off and patch everything. For one, they have legacy systems that are, that they're critical, but they're now so old that they can't readily be moved to something modern, right? Okay, well, that now they're stuck. That's called technical debt, is what we talk about as far as that goes.
Yeah.
You need it, you have it, and you can't quite move it to where it needs to be. Well, I mean, they're looking for all those things. And if it's in that situation, there's a good chance that, the reason you haven't moved it to a modern platform is because there's a lot of money tied up into it, right? It's a critical system. You can't just move it, So there's revenue around it.
Well, if you had an unlimited budget, if you had an unlimited budget, you could do whatever you want, but most companies don't, of course. So, but
no, there's only one government, and
unless you're Mr. Cooper, of course, we have an unlimited budget, and
sure,
they pay Mike Madero lots of money to do it.
Yeah. Let's.
Well, hey, Mike, I think we'll
let my boss hear that one.
Yeah. So, well, hey, Mike, this has been a great conversation. I think it's very informative, much needed, and I look forward to seeing you around town. I saw you at a happy hour a couple of weeks ago, so hopefully we'll get to cross paths again in the near future.
I've already dropped a tickler in a few years to say, hey, we need to do this again. When's the next one?
Yeah, no, that was fun. So, hey, Mike, thanks again for being on the show. It was very informative. I learned a lot, as I always try to get smart people like you on the show, and hopefully the guests out there will be the same. But if someone wanted to get in touch with you, Mike, I know you're not doing consulting or anything like that, but how would, if someone wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. I know this because everyone seems to find me on LinkedIn. So apparently I'm not too hard to find. Drop me a line.
Yeah, good.
Make sure to include a little note with your request to connect. That is one of my pet peeves, is when you just get a blind connection. It's like, well, yeah, you look like a nice person, but who are you and what do you want and why?
Yeah.
Just a quick note. Yeah. Say hi. Introduce yourself a little bit. And
yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good strategy. And you separate yourself from everyone else on LinkedIn who's just doing the blind connections.
Exactly.
So, cool. Well, we'll end on that note. Mike, thanks again for being on the show. And that is a wrap for Business Brains and the Bottom Line. Until next time.
Thank you.